Hi guys, welcome to Imperialism Lecture B, number 2. We're going to wrap this up. Definitely tried to fit in too much in 10 minutes last time. So we were in the middle of the Spanish-American War. We just had gone over some reasons why the United States entered that war. We remember that belly rubbing is imperialism, the hunger for, maybe you could say it, raw materials, good for you. New markets, splendid. And the military concept as well. We went over white man's burden, the frontier, Turner frontier thesis, the manifest destiny idea. And we also have to go into Monroe Doctrine and I think Roosevelt Corollary in a moment. But let's wrap up Spanish-American War. The United States beat the Spanish in Cuba quite handily. This is where Teddy Roosevelt became a very notorious or famous American, as I think he was the assistant secretary to the Navy, and he had marched up San Juan Hill, and there's video clippings, and it was in the news, and it was a big story, and maybe it was, something that was used pretty effectively by Roosevelt and by the American press, definitely, to get his name in the news, and he's going to become, in 1900, the vice presidential, name on the ticket with McKinley, perhaps bringing that notoriety and that name into politics, but boy, is McKinley going to be into a shock. Well, he won't know because he's going to be assassinated. Teddy Roosevelt's going to be a different kind of president. But nevertheless, the Spanish-American War ends quite quickly. Now, just to backtrack about 10 feet here, before the war, there was an anti-imperialistic league in the United States, and there were a good chunk of academics and intellectuals that were really arguing against imperialism. I don't want you to think that everybody was on board. There were Americans that were taking a stand. Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens was one of them, and he stood for anti-imperialism on the idea of it wasn't the right American democratic thing to do, the Jeffersonian idea. You also had some unions that were I think maybe Samuel Gompers, that was really weary of imperialism because of the fear of the the cheap labor that would come into the picture, and that wouldn't be good for unions. And there was also a racist element, people that were anti-imperialistic because they felt as though the United States shouldn't be, sticking its hands in places that were uncivilized, like Latin America and Cuba and the Asian islands. But nevertheless, we go. Before the war, in order to calm some of those fears, you'll see the vocabulary word every once in a while, the Teller Amendment. And the Teller Amendment was basically a promise to the Cuban people that the United States, that was about to embark on the Spanish-American War, was there as their ally and had no intentions of colonializing or taking over Cuba, but rather the Teller Amendment. In class I say, remember, tell her, tell Cuba, Teller Amendment, tell her that it is going to be okay, that we will not be in control, that they will be able to be independent. So now that we've won the war, the Treaty of Paris is going to be very favorable to the United States, and we're going to throw in the Philippines for an extra prize. Yeah, in the middle of the war, it's only 6 weeks. Admiral Dewey, who was a Navy admiral, was in the Pacific Islands. This is right off the coast of Japan and East China Sea, and you have a chunk of islands called the Philippines. And it's magnificent for the United States in terms of raw materials and new markets, but it's also right near the Pacific islands and the coast, and there's Australia and there's China and there's Japan, and the United States, as we are cruising by those islands and we see the Spanish flag and we're already at war with Spain. Hey, why not take the islands? And we took the Philippines, and we have had a lot of problems when we took the Philippines. There was an insurrection, and hundreds of thousands of Filipinos were killed by soldiers protecting U.S. interests in the Philippines. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. Maybe you can write and email me and Mr. Hughes, you're anti-American. But nevertheless, facts are facts. And dealing with that fact is important in understanding world politics today. And it's casting no blame on the dead. It's only saying the United States took the Philippines, and the Filipino people, being nationalistic on their own right, didn't look favorable on those events. The Treaty of Paris gave us Puerto Rico. It gave us control over Guam. It gave us control in the Philippines. And it allowed us to guide Cuba into the next step. So we did Teller Amendment. The second one is the Platt Amendment, which is actually the forget the Teller Amendment. The Platt Amendment, three basic ideas you can write about on thematic, that would be great, was that the United States had the ability to intervene militarily in Cuba. We had the ability to influence them in their treaties. We could veto treaties from other countries, I believe, that were unfavorable, and we got to help them write their constitution. So, obviously this gives the United States and business interests in particular a, pretty big hand in Cuba. And, the result is that Cuba really did become kind of a haven for criminal enterprise and big business, and the people maybe all didn't prosper at the same time. I'm not arguing that that's rationalization for what occurred, which is communism in the 1950s. But it definitely maybe gave some people the wrong idea or a bad image of the United States and Latin America. We've done before, I'm done with Spanish-American War, we've done before the Monroe Doctrine. Teddy Roosevelt, who becomes president in 1901 when William McKinley is assassinated in Buffalo, we talk about him separately in the Progressive Era, but he becomes a very strong foreign policy advocate for the United States, coming from the Navy. The United States really builds its Navy under Teddy Roosevelt, and that's going to allow us to be a world power. I got to do Roosevelt Corollary. If Monroe Doctrine, if we remember 1823, is the idea that Latin America is our hood and that we are kind of a protectorate over it, at least maybe psycho-spiritually. The Roosevelt Corollary is Monroe with a gun. Sometimes you'll see cartoons of Teddy Roosevelt as a cop with a big stick, and he's stepping in Latin America, putting our footprint. We have the ability now to enforce what our special interests are, whether it's Chiquita Banana or it's the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal, many people don't know this, is built in Panama, right? Panama didn't exist before we wanted the Panama Canal. It was part of Colombia. And when Colombia turned down an offer from the United States to pay them to build the canal, the United States supported a Panamanian revolution in Panama. And that new government then, of course, gave us their blessings to build the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal, of course, linking the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean, making a trade route possible and making it more favorable to big business and interest for the United States. And I'm not saying that's had a bad effect. It had a good effect. It's going to make us more profitable. It's going to allow us to buy more things and to sell more things and for our economy to grow and hire new workers. And, there's always the flip side of kind of economic nationalism and how it affects the United States in a good way. Wrapping up, there's a couple other areas that we want to talk about really quick. Alaska, called Stewart's Purchase or Stewart's Folly, was in the late 1800s, 1869, maybe I'm wrong. And it was called a folly because people thought it was ridiculous for us to buy Alaska from Russia. Of course, folly means joke's on you, because oil, natural gas, raw materials. And Alaska becomes part of the United States in the 1950s after being a territory for a good 80 years. Hawaii is annexed by the United States after a supported revolution by planters on the island. I only have 90 seconds, so I got to wrap this up. But the Dole family, pineapples, right? They had gone to Hawaii, and under Queen Lithakawani had become Hawaiians and lived there until the United States passed a tariff and making it more expensive for them to sell their goods in the United States. There was a push to overthrow the Queen, and we silently supported that. Interestingly enough, it wasn't to William McKinley. I think that this was under Cleveland, and he refused to annex Hawaii. He felt that it was the wrong thing to do. William McKinley annexed Hawaii, and that is kind of a stain maybe a little bit on how we got Hawaii, but nevertheless we got it. So Roosevelt Corollary, that concept of Latin America, that's not Hawaii. I'm sorry, I'm overlapping a little bit. Make sure you get that idea that Latin America now is under our influence, our sphere of influence. We intervened 60, 70 times in the early 1900s in Latin America, in Nicaragua and Colombia and Mexico and kind of all over in order to protect the United States' interest and make sure that we had favorable regimes. And that does have a backlash later on. There is an anti-Americanism thing that's kind of maybe used by different governments in Latin America to this day. Imperialism is belly rubbing. Spanish-American War, Hawaii, the Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Guam, the Panama Canal, Alaska, Seward's Folly, open door policy with China. Oh my goodness, we pushed the door open with China. It's called open door policy. 10 minutes is up. See you later, guys.